When the raider finally stopped moving, the wrench slipped from Evan's hand. He collapsed onto the floor, chest heaving, blood dripping from a gash on his forehead. Lyra rushed to him, falling to her knees, her small hands pressed against his wounds, her tears spilling freely. "Evan," she cried, "please don't leave me. Please." He tried to smile through the pain. "Still here," he whispered. Her tears fell onto his face, and she whispered something in her language, words the translator couldn't catch. They sounded like a prayer, or maybe a vow. The other raider ships were still circling outside. They would come soon. But in that moment, Evan didn't care. He had fought with nothing but a wrench and his will, and he had won. He had proven, if only to himself, that he was not the empty man he once believed. And as Lyra held him, trembling but alive, Evan realized something deeper. He had not just fought for her, he had fought for himself, for the chance to be more than what the gay universe had told him he was. For the first time in years, Evan felt human, truly, fiercely human. The shuttle smelled of smoke and blood. Sparks still hissed from broken panels, and the floor was stained where the raider had fallen. Evan leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling in painful rhythm. Every breath felt like a knife, but he forced himself to stay conscious. Lyra was kneeling in front of him, her tiny hands glowing faintly as she pressed them against his wounds. Her voice trembled with fear and determination. "Stay. Please stay." Evan tried to joke, his voice weak. "Don't worry. I've been through worse." But that was a lie. He had never been through worse. Not physically, not in his soul. His body was broken. Yet it was his heart that felt the heaviest. He had fought with everything he had. And for the first time, he wasn't fighting for money or for orders or just to survive another day. He had fought for her. When her healing glow faded, Lyra's tears still fell freely. She whispered, "Why? Why did you fight like that?" Evan swallowed hard. His throat was dry, his voice cracked. "Because I couldn't let them take you. Because you chose me." Lyra looked into his eyes, her silver gaze deep and unshaken despite the tears. "I did not choose you for strength. I did not choose you because you could fight. I chose you because your heart would answer." Her words struck deeper than any blade. Evan remembered the ruins where she had first spoken to him, her fragile voice declaring, "You're my husband now." Back then, he had thought it was a mistake, a ritual he didn't understand. But now, sitting bloody and broken, he finally understood. She hadn't asked for a warrior. She hadn't asked for someone unstoppable. She had asked for someone who wouldn't leave her. Evan's hand trembled as he lifted it, brushing away a tear from her cheek. "I'm no hero, Lyra. I'm just a broken man who fixes machines." Lyra leaned into his touch, her small face warm against his rough fingers. "To me, you are more. You are the one who answered when no one else did. That is enough." Silence filled the shuttle, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of unspoken truths. For years, Evan had drifted through life without purpose, hiding from the weight of his own failures. But in Lyra's eyes, he saw something new. Not pity, not fear, but belief. And belief was powerful. That night, as the shuttle drifted quietly, Lyra curled close to him, her head resting against his shoulder. He could feel how small she was, how fragile, but also how strong her spirit burned. Her presence filled the void of the shuttle like warmth in a freezing room. She spoke softly, in her language, words the translator couldn't catch, but Evan didn't need to understand. He felt them in the way she clutched his arm, in the steady beat of her heart against his side. They were words of trust, of binding, of something eternal. For the first time in a long time, Evan didn't feel hollow. He didn't feel like a ghost wandering through space. He felt alive, tied to someone else, pulled into her light. Later, when his strength returned, he asked quietly, "What happens now? What does this bond mean for us?" Lyra lifted her gaze, silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It means we share everything: pain, hope, life. When you fight, I stand with you. When you fall, I lift you. When you are lost, I call you back. Evan's throat tightened. That's a lot for one man. She smiled faintly through her tears. Not for a husband. Those words, simple and soft, hit him harder than any raider's fist. In her world, husband wasn't just a title. It was a vow, a bond that could not be broken. And now it was his vow too. Evan didn't know what the future held. Raiders were still hunting them, the galaxy was still cruel, and he was still just one man. But when Lyra placed her small hand over his heart, he knew one truth with absolute clarity. He wasn't alone anymore, and as long as she believed in him, he would fight, bleed, and survive. Not just because he had to, but because he wanted to, or her. For them. For the bond that had made him human again. Years passed like quiet rivers flowing through the stars. What began as a desperate flight turned into something greater. Something Evan had never thought he would have again. A life. He and Lyra found a hidden world far from the raider roots. A small green planet with soft hills and skies painted in gentle colors. It wasn't Earth and it wasn't her glowing homeland, but it was safe. And safety was a treasure rarer than gold in the galaxy. The first months were hard, the soil was strange, the weather unforgiving. But Evan worked with the same stubbornness he once used to repair machines. He built shelters from the wreckage of their shuttle, shaped tools with his scarred hands, and cleared fields for planting. Lyra was always there beside him. Her hands were small, but her spirit never bent. She taught him her people's songs, sang to the seeds they planted, and reminded him that life grows where hearts are willing to protect it. In time, their small home became more than shelter. It became a place of warmth. At night, the fire crackled while Lyra hummed softly, and Evan listened with his eyes closed, finally knowing peace. But word of their survival spread. Traders came, then colonists. People whispered of the human who had defied raiders with nothing but a wrench, and of the last daughter of a lost world who called him husband. The story traveled faster than any ship, reaching far-off stations and lonely drifters who longed for hope. Some came seeking safety. Others came seeking truth. They found both. Evan, though older now, still stood tall, his rough hands building homes for those who joined them. Lyra, with her gentle voice, welcomed strangers as family. Together, they created a community that grew from fear and ashes into something living, breathing, and beautiful. One evening, as the twin suns of their adopted world set, Evan sat outside their home watching children chase glowing insects in the fields. Some of the children were human, some alien, but their laughter blended together like music. For the first time in his long, weary life, Evan allowed himself to smile without regret. Lyra came to sit beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the fading light. She was still small, still delicate, but in her gaze burned a fire brighter than ever. She leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "Do you see? You gave them a home. You gave me a future." Evan shook his head slowly. "No, Lyra. We built this. You gave me something to fight for. Without you, I'd still be a ghost drifting in the dark." For a moment, silence hung between them, warm and full. Then she said softly, "When I called, that day I thought no one would answer. But you came. That is why humans are different. You don't turn away when hearts cry out." Evan looked at the sky, remembering all he had lost and all he had gained. Maybe that's what makes us human. We're stubborn. We keep answering calls, even when the world tells us not to, even when it hurts. He thought of the raider. He fought, the blood on his hands, the endless fear. He thought of the nights drifting in silence, holding on to nothing but her hand. And he thought of now, fields of laughter, a world reborn. A small group of colonists approached, asking for guidance on building irrigation for their crops. Evan stood slowly, his bones aching but his spirit strong. He gave them instructions, his voice calm, his heart steady. And as he worked with them, he realized something. The man who once thought he was nothing had become a pillar for others. That night, when the stars appeared again, Evan told the story to the gathered settlers. He spoke of the ruins where he found her, of the moment she pointed at him with trembling hands and said, "You're my husband now." Some laughed, some wiped their eyes, but all listened. And at the end, he said quietly, "I wasn't chosen because I was strong. I wasn't chosen because I was ready. I was chosen because I answered, and that choice changed everything." Lyra reached for his hand, intertwining her small fingers with his. In her eyes, he saw the reflection of all they had built together: home, family, and legacy. And so under the endless stars their story lived on, a petite alien girl who believed and a human man who chose to be worthy. The decision came quickly when a miner tried to drag Lyra from her bunk while Evan was working. Her scream echoed down the corridor, raw and terrified. Evan dropped his tools and charged. His fist connected before he even thought, and the man hit the ground with a broken nose and curses spilling from his mouth. Alarms blared, orders were shouted. The ship turned chaotic. And Evan did the only thing his heart told him to do. He grabbed Lyra's hand and ran. They raced through the steel hallways, boots clanging against metal floors. Behind them, angry voices followed, and the alarm lights flashed red like the heartbeat of the ship itself. Evan's chest burned, his breath ragged, but he didn't stop. Not once. When they reached the docking bay, the guards blocked their path. Evan didn't think, he acted. He swung a heavy wrench from the tool rack, knocking one man aside, then shoved Lyra into the small escape shuttle. Blaster fire sparked against the walls. Adrenaline screamed in his veins as he slammed the hatch shut and threw himself into the pilot's chair. The shuttle roared to life. As the ship's guns turned toward them, Evan punched the controls, his hands moving faster than his thoughts. The shuttle burst free, spinning into the vast black of space. Behind them, the mining ship shrank into the distance, alarms fading until there was only silence again. Evan's hands shook on the controls. He could barely breathe. But when he turned, Lyra was there, pressed against her seat, pale and trembling, yet alive. Her silver eyes met his, wide with fear and something else. Gratitude. "You kept the promise," she whispered. Evan swallowed hard, a lump in his throat. He had no plan, no destination, nothing but a stolen shuttle and the weight of a choice that had changed his life. But when Lyra reached across the small space between them and touched his hand, he tightened his grip around hers. They were fugitives now, hunted, alone against the stars. But Evan knew one thing for certain. He would not let her go, not now, not ever. The stars stretched endlessly outside the shuttle's cracked window, cold and distant. For Evan, every one of those stars looked like a question he had no answer to. He had stolen a ship, betrayed his crew, and turned his back on the only life he knew. Now it was just him and Lyra, drifting through the black, hunted and alone. The shuttle was small, built for emergencies, not for long journeys. The rations were limited, the oxygen tanks strained, and the old engine groaned with every jump. Evan spent hours each day crouched over the panels, patching wires, tightening bolts, trying to keep the ship alive for one more stretch of space. His hands were blistered, his body aching, but he kept working. And always, when he looked up from the controls, she was there. Lyra sat quietly most of the time, watching him with those silver eyes. She didn't demand, didn't complain. Sometimes, she hummed softly, her voice so delicate it almost blended with the hum of the engine. Evan didn't understand the words of her songs, but he felt the weight behind them. They carried sadness but also hope, like a memory refusing to die. One evening, while Evan was adjusting the navigation system, Lyra moved closer. She held something in her hands, a small crystal, glowing faintly blue. "What's that?" Evan asked. Lyra cradled it like a fragile treasure. "From my home," she said softly. "We place them in the rivers. At night, the water glowed. Children would follow the lights, laughing, chasing them like fireflies. Her lips trembled as she spoke, and her voice faded into silence. Evan realized she was holding the last piece of a world that no longer existed. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but words felt clumsy. Instead, he sat beside her, letting the silence speak for him. For a long time, they simply stared at the glowing crystal together, its light reflecting in their eyes. And in that quiet moment, Evan felt something inside him shift. He was not just keeping a shuttle running, he was keeping her hope alive. Days bled into weeks. Food grew scarcer, and Evan gave more of his portion to Lyra, pretending he wasn't hungry. She noticed, of course. One night, she pushed half her share back toward him. "You need strength too," she insisted. But Evan shook his head with a tired smile. "I'll be fine. You eat." Lyra frowned, her small hands gripping the ration tightly. "Why do you always give more to me?" Evan hesitated. He wasn't good with words, but he spoke the truth. "Because I'd rather see you live than watch you fade away." Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked at him as though no one had ever said something like that to her before. There were nights when the fear was worse than hunger. Radar signals flickered on the scanner from time to time, forcing Evan to shut off all power and let the shuttle drift silently in the dark. In those hours when the universe felt like it was holding its breath, Lyra would press closer to him. "Are we going to die?" she whispered once, her voice barely audible. Evan looked at her trembling form, the fear etched across her face. He wanted to tell her the truth, that maybe they would, that the odds were against them. But instead he placed his hand gently over hers and said, "Not while I'm here." And strangely, as he said it, he realized he meant it. The loneliness that had once haunted him began to fade. He had spent years drifting through life like a ghost, existing but not living. Now, every moment mattered. Every repair, every ration, every decision. It all mattered because it was for her. Lyra, in return, gave him something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. When she sang, when she smiled faintly through exhaustion, when she whispered stories of rivers and glowing nights, she reminded him that there was still beauty worth fighting for. One night, as they lay on opposite sides of the cramped shuttle, Lyra spoke into the silence. "You saved me," she said softly. Evan turned his head toward her. "I don't know if I saved you, I just couldn't leave you." She closed her eyes, whispering, "That is saving." And as the shuttle drifted among the endless stars, Evan realized that he was no longer running away from something. He was running toward something, something fragile, something precious, something worth protecting with everything he had left. The silence of space did not last forever. Evan knew it wouldn't. Every time the scanner beeped, every time a faint signal flickered in the distance, his chest grew tight. Raiders were out there, searching, waiting, and sooner or later, they would find them. That moment came without warning. Evan was asleep, slumped in the pilot's chair, when Lyra shook him awake. Her small hands were trembling, her silver eyes wide with fear. "They are near," she whispered. The scanner screamed red. Multiple ships closing fast. Evan cursed under his breath and threw himself at the controls. The old shuttle shuddered as he pushed it harder than it was built to go. Engines roared, metal rattled, but the raider ships were faster. Within minutes, shadows loomed around them. 3 black vessels circling like wolves around prey. "Stay down," Evan barked as the first blast struck their side. Sparks rained from the panels, the smell of burning wires filling the cabin. Lyra curled against the wall, clutching her glowing crystal as if it could shield her. Evan fought the controls, teeth gritted, heart hammering. He swerved the shuttle between asteroids, trying to lose them in the field of rocks. For a moment, it seemed to work. 2 ships fell behind, weaving through the debris, but the third latched on, firing hooks that bit into the shuttle's hull. "They're boarding," Evan whispered, his stomach sinking. The hatch burst open with a deafening crash. Heavy boots stomped onto the floor, and a towering raider stepped through, armor-scarred, face twisted into a cruel grin. His eyes landed on Lyra instantly. There she is, the raider growled. The last of her kind, worth more than a fleet of ships. Lyra screamed as he lunged for her. Evan didn't think. He didn't plan. His hand grabbed the nearest thing, a wrench stained with oil. He hurled himself forward, ramming into the raider with all his weight. The impact barely moved the giant, but it surprised him enough for Lyra to slip free. The raider snarled and slammed a fist into Evan's chest, knocking the air from his lungs. Pain exploded through him, but he didn't stop. He swung the wrench. Again and again, striking armor, striking flesh, striking anything he could reach. Each blow echoed like thunder in the small shuttle. The raider laughed through the hits, mocking him. You think you can protect her, human? You're weak. You're nothing. But Evan's rage drowned out the words. For years, he had lived like he was nothing, just another worker, another number. But now, as he saw Lyra's terrified eyes, he felt something burn inside him, a fire he hadn't felt in decades. I am not nothing, he roared, driving the wrench into the raider's helmet. Metal cracked. Blood sprayed. The giant stumbled back, roaring in pain. Evan's body screamed with exhaustion, every bone aching. But he didn't stop. He tackled the raider to the ground, bashing, clawing, punching with a desperation that bordered on madness. Each strike was fueled not by strength but by something greater, by the promise he had made, by the fragile girl behind him, by the knowledge that if he failed, she would be gone forever. Evan never thought his life would change on that empty moon. He was just an engineer, a man who fixed broken machines and tightened rusty bolts. His world was made of metal walls, humming engines, and the smell of oil on his hands. He had left Earth years ago, tired of the endless wars, tired of watching friends fight over scraps, tired of debts that crushed men into shadows. Out here in the far reaches of space, he thought he had escaped all that. But loneliness was heavy, heavier than any machine he carried. The company had sent him with a small team to check out the ruins of an old outpost. It was supposed to be abandoned, nothing but stone, dust, and silence. Evan walked carefully through broken halls, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Cracks split the walls like scars. The air was thin, the silence thick. He felt like he was walking through the skeleton of something that once lived, and then he heard it. A sound. Faint, like someone breathing where no one should be. His heart stopped. He lifted his light, hands shaking just a little. At first he thought it was a trick of shadows. Then he saw her. A small figure sat curled against the corner of the wall, half hidden under torn cloth. She was not human. Her skin was pale, almost glowing under the light. Her eyes, large, silver, and trembling, stared back at him. She looked fragile, smaller than him, almost childlike, but there was something ancient in her gaze, something that told him she had seen more than he could ever imagine. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. Evan's mind raced. Was she dangerous? Was she lost? Was she even real? Then she stood, slowly, carefully, like someone gathering the last pieces of strength they had. She pointed at him, her small hand shaking but firm, and in a voice carried by the broken translator strapped to her neck, she said words that froze Evan in place. You're my husband now." Evan blinked. Surely he had misheard. He glanced at the old translator, thinking it had glitched, but the girl's expression was steady. Her silver eyes did not waver. She repeated, softer this time, almost like a prayer. "You are my husband." Evan's mouth went dry. He almost laughed, because what else could he do? I think your machine's broken," he muttered, his voice echoing off the stone walls, but she shook her head slowly. "No," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "I chose. You are mine now." There was no hesitation in her words, no confusion, only certainty. Evan's chest tightened. He had never seen anyone look at him like that. Not on Earth, not on the mining ships, not in all the places he had wandered. People usually saw a worker, a tool, another body to throw at a problem. But this girl, this strange, delicate alien, She looked at him like he was something more, like he was the answer to her fear. He wanted to tell her she was wrong. He wanted to walk away, because he wasn't anyone's hero. He was just a tired man with grease under his nails and too many regrets on his back. He couldn't be what she thought he was. He couldn't carry someone else's hope. But then he saw it, the way her hands trembled as she clutched the torn cloth around her, the way her silver eyes glistened, holding back tears that threatened to fall. She was afraid. She was alone. And in her own way, she had reached out across the emptiness of the universe to grab onto the first hand she found. His hand. For a moment, the ruin around them faded. There was no broken stone, no war-torn moon, no empty silence. Only her and him. Her fragile voice. His beating heart. Evan took a slow breath. He didn't know why, but he didn't correct her. He didn't step back. He simply stood there, frozen between fear and something else he couldn't yet name. And in that quiet, ruined place, under the weight of 1 billion stars, the life of one tired human man shifted forever, because a petite alien girl had chosen him with the simple, trembling words, "You're my husband now." Evan did not sleep that night. Even after they returned to the mining ship, his mind stayed on the silver-eyed girl. She sat quietly in the corner of the shuttle, wrapped in a blanket he had given her, watching him with the same steady gaze. She didn't blink much, and every time their eyes met, he felt a strange weight in his chest. Her name, she said, was Lyra. The translator stuttered over her language, but the meaning was clear enough. She spoke slowly, her voice soft, almost fragile, like the sound of water dripping in a cave. When Evan asked what she meant by husband, she clasped her small hands together, touched them to her heart, and explained, "In my people's way. When we are in danger, when all hope is lost, we call. If someone answers, they become our bond. Protector, companion, family. That is husband." Evan rubbed his face, trying to make sense of it. To him, the word meant something else. Marriage, love, promises made under Earth's skies. But to her, it was survival. A last thread tying her to life. He wanted to tell her she was mistaken. He was no protector, no warrior. He was an engineer. A man who patched broken pipes and oiled loud gears. He fixed ships, not lives. Yet when he opened his mouth, the words wouldn't come. Because Lyra looked at him as if he was the only light, left in her darkness. "You don't understand," Evan said quietly. "I'm no one, I can't save anybody." But Lyra shook her head. "You came when I called. That is enough." Her certainty unsettled him. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not his commanders, not his crew, not even his family back on Earth. To them, he was useful when he worked, replaceable when he didn't. But to Lyra, he was already something more. And she had only known him for hours. Over the next days, Evan learned more about her. She ate little, as if she had been starving for weeks. Her people, she said, were almost gone. Raiders had hunted them across the stars. They were small, fragile, peaceful. They never built great weapons or mighty fleets. They built songs and gardens and riverside cities instead. And when the raiders came, fire and steel destroyed them. Lyra was one of the last. She had fled, carrying with her only the tradition of her people, the sacred bond, the one hope that if she called into the void, someone would answer, and that someone was him. At night she would sit near him, humming melodies in her language. He didn't understand the words, but he felt them. They were songs of loss, of homes that no longer existed, of laughter swallowed by silence. Sometimes she cried, though she tried to hide it. And each time Evan's heart ached in ways he had not known it could. Still, doubt gnawed at him. He didn't want to carry a title he didn't deserve. "Lyra," he said one evening when they sat in the quiet corner of the ship, "I can't be your husband, not like you think. I can't fight armies. I can't bring back your people." Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes wet but firm. "I do not ask for armies. I ask for one heart that will not leave me. Evan's breath caught. One heart. That was all she wanted. In that moment, something shifted inside him. For years he had lived as if nothing mattered. Fix the ship, take the credits, move on. He thought he was empty, a man made of rust and regret. But Lyra's simple words dug into him, pulling out something he thought was gone. A piece of himself that still wanted to be needed. He didn't answer right away. His throat was too tight, his chest too heavy. But when Lyra reached out, her small hand trembling as it touched his sleeve, he did not pull away. For the first time in a long time, Evan let himself be chosen, not by a company, not by orders, not by duty, but by someone who believed in him, even when he could not believe in himself. And so, even without speaking the word, he accepted her claim. Evan was hers now. Life on the mining ship changed the moment Lyra stepped aboard. For Evan, every day became a careful balancing act. He gave her food from his own share, found a quiet corner for her to rest, and kept her away from the crew's curious eyes as long as he could. But a secret like hers could not be hidden forever. It was the captain who discovered her first. A broad man with cold eyes, Captain Doran had no patience for surprises. He spotted Lyra one evening in the mess hall sitting silently at Evan's side with her silver eyes lowered. The room went still. Forks clattered, men muttered. "What is this?" the captain's voice boomed. "Why is there an alien on my ship?" Evan's stomach dropped. He stood quickly, shielding Lyra behind him. "She's not a threat," he said. "She just needs help." But Doran's gaze was sharp and greedy. "Do you know what someone would pay for a rare creature like this? The raiders hunt them for a reason. Their kind is valuable." Lyra's hands gripped Evan's sleeve tightly, her small fingers trembling. She understood enough to know danger when she heard it. Evan could feel her fear through the way she clung to him, and something inside him hardened. "She's not for sale," he said firmly. The crew laughed. Some called him mad. Others warned him to step aside. "Come on, Evan," one man sneered. "You're a mechanic, not a hero. Let the captain handle this." But Lyra's voice broke through the noise. Barely above a whisper, she said, "You promised." Those words struck him like a blade. She wasn't wrong. In that ruined outpost, when she had looked at him with eyes full of despair, he had not turned away. He had let her believe in him. He had let himself believe too. So Evan squared his shoulders and repeated louder this time, "She's not for sale." The captain's smile was thin and cruel. "Then you've just made yourself an enemy, boy." That night Evan knew he had to make a choice. If he stayed, the crew would take her. If he fought, he would lose. But if he ran, there was a chance. A small one, but still a chance.